The cool thing for those who are DIY, who are on like a super tight budget, Shogun gives you that ability to, to do it yourself.
Welcome to Honest E-commerce, where we are dedicated to cutting through the BS and finding actionable advice for online store owners.
I'm your host, Chase Clymer.
And I'm your host, Annette Grant.
And we believe running an online business does not have to be complicated or a guessing game.
If you are struggling to scaling your sales, Electric Eye is here to help. To apply to work with us, visit electriceye.io/connect to learn more.
And let's get on with the show. On today's episode of Honest E-commerce, we talk to Nick Raushenbush from Shogun about the power of building a mobile-first website. Hey everybody, this is Chase Clymer with my co-host Annette Grant coming to you with another episode of Honest E-commerce. Today's guest is a good friend of mine, met him 3 or 4 times now, Nick Raushenbush from Shogun. We caught him after quite a bit of travel. I'm surprised we got him on the show. Are you jet lagged by any chance?
No. So, first of all, glad to be on the show. Second of all, surprisingly not. Well, I guess yes and no. I've been, taking advantage of my jet lag to be like a super early bird this week. Shogun now we're like over 25 team members, and it's a fully remote team. So we span 9 different time zones. And that means that if I'm in Pacific time, getting up earlier is better. So being jet lagged gave me an advantage there, getting up at like 4 or 5 a.m. for some of our team meetings.
Yeah, I'm not an early riser, so anytime I'm on the West Coast, I feel like way more productive.
Yeah, it's a good feeling. Usually, I am also like a night owl, but coming back from Asia, I always get it kind of flips, and then I feel super productive. I feel like a productive member of society. Whereas when I'm staying up until like 3 a.m. working and then sleeping in until 11, I'm like, oh gosh, this brings me back to like college days.
In a previous life, I lived above a bar, so I couldn't go to bed early. I was always up until 3 a.m. But now I live in the burbs, and it's great.
Nice.
Cool. So, like you said, Nick is the co-founder of Shogun. It's a really easy to use page builder for Shopify. You guys have branched out to Bigcommerce as well. Is that right?
We are on Bigcommerce as well and expanding to more platforms in 2019. So excited for that.
And then before Shogun, you worked at a creative agency, didn't you?
Yeah, I actually started a creative agency called Glass and Marker when I was 25. So ran that company for about 3 or 4 years. They're still alive and well. They make our awesome videos now. Yeah.
So how was the transition from going from a creative agency to now a product-based company? How was that?
Yeah, it was, to be honest, it was a steep learning curve, kind of right as I was leaving Glass and Marker, finally like the fruits of our hard work were coming to fruition. We were finally starting to hit like multi-million-dollar run rate. And for whatever reason, I was just like, I want to try to do tech. I want to try to do software. Very, very San Francisco of me. And
I think that's just the entrepreneurial spirit. You're like, you know what? I did this. Let me try it. What's another challenge?
Yeah, I guess for me at the time, I wanted to take more risk, or I thought I wanted to take more risk. And the funny thing is I left my agency and started working on Shogun. And Shogun had a completely different purpose at that point. It was a page builder for Rails. And we worked on it super hard for about 6 months. The last thing we did, we were about to give up. We integrated with Shopify, and then we actually gave up. So but the integration still existed. And over the course of the next year and a half, we picked up 1,000 users and got it, less than 1,000 users, probably maybe around 500 or so. And we started to make around $20,000 monthly recurring revenue, which was enough for me and my business partner to, start hiring some other folks and paying ourselves very meager salaries. And, if you fast forward a year, we were finishing up, this tech accelerator called Y Combinator, hadn't raised any money to date, but we're doing $85,000 a month in monthly recurring revenue. So at that point, we were doing already $1 million in annual recurring revenue. And that was April of this past year of 2018. And we've actually grown quite a bit since then. We've multiplied. by a couple times. So yeah, it ended up working out. But at the time, there was a year where I basically thought that leaving my agency and trying to do this thing, like I was just a complete failure.
Have you
Um,
uh have you read Think and Grow Rich?
no, I haven't.
It's a good one. But there's a story in there that is so funny and similar. And I think it's like, I don't know, it has a bunch of topics. It's a lot about like mentally, like you have to prepare yourself for like taking on business challenges and whatnot. So there's this allegory in there about this guy. Actually, I think it was a real story, actually. This guy owned a gold mine and like they got all the equipment. It was a bunch of investment and they went down there and there wasn't gold. Like they spent all this money on this stuff and there wasn't gold down there for them to get. Like I think they got like a little bit of stuff, but then like the mine pooped out. Guy went bankrupt. He sold the company to some scrapper and he like went back to New York and he was like, oh, that sucked. Scrapper then had like a surveyor come out and the guy was actually like 2 meters away from where like the real gold was. And so that mine started producing so much gold.
Damn. Yeah.
So anytime I guess to bring this to the topic of the conversation here for our store owners, if you think it's rough, just keep doing it. Your riches are right around the corner, I guess. Put a positive spin on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was the biggest lesson that when we were working on Shogun, a friend of mine who's been very, very successful. He sold a company for over $1 billion. He just kept saying to us, he was like, "I think you should just keep working on it. I think you should just keep working on it." And at the time, I thought that was just like such generic advice. I was just like, what kind of advice is that, man? And he was totally right. Like, we just needed to keep working on it and get more users and talk to our clients, our users, and figure out what they wanted and build that. And so I think that it's the same thing for folks who are working in e-commerce. If you just persist and you just keep trying and you find a product or a service offering that people love, you're going to be successful. So yeah.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you there. So let's kind of pivot the conversation to your realm, your expertise over there at Shogun. Let's start talking about mobile versus desktop.
Yeah, totally. So, page design, that's what I wanted to talk about today. And it's mostly because, right now our software is being going through like a massive overhaul, right? Now, I think it's like over 25% of our clients now should be seeing the new dashboard and with the analytics suite and all that. But, we're releasing analytics and A/B testing, and we're turning towards the editor for like Q1 of next year. And the big conversation that we're having is, should we make the editing experience in Shogun mobile first, right? Instead of, as most people who have experience with website builders, usually you hop into a website builder, you see the desktop first, right? And you design for desktop. And then you kind of make sure that your desktop design is mobile responsive. But now, and what was it? I think Shopify reported that like, was it 66% of sales on Black Friday were mobile?
Yep.
Right.
I think that was it. Yeah. Something crazy. So now we're wondering, or do we have it backwards? Should we actually be setting up the Shogun, page editor, page builder to be mobile first, and then desktop to be to kind of be the not the afterthought, but the secondary screen, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, so that's kind of that. That's what the prompt is for this conversation. And I guess what I can talk about is like some of the things that I view as being really important for taking a mobile first strategy.
Yeah, I mean, with every website nowadays, like they're all responsive, but mobile is definitely like an afterthought, and it like kind of just responds like shittily, if to put a word on
Yeah.
it. It's designed desktop first and then like it's made mobile, and that's like the worst way to actually approach it. Like you need to approach it from like a mobile perspective. Like if I was on my phone and I like needed to go through the whole checkout experience on a website, it should be as seamless as it would be on desktop. And
Totally.
a lot of people aren't doing that. They're not even like checking out on their phone or on a tablet just to see how that experience is. And it's usually like 10 times more difficult to check out on mobile if people aren't actively getting in there and doing these test purchases and seeing what the friction points are.
Absolutely, and that was actually one of like I've got like a handful of tips here, and that was one of them, which is like to make checkout a breeze, right? You really want to make sure that the checkout experience is seamless, and so you've got technology that you can leverage, like digital wallets, right? To make that experience just a couple of taps. That's really what you're going for. And as you're building your site, or as you're working with your agency to build your site, you want to make sure that you're just going over that user flow again and again and again, specific to mobile screen sizes, and making sure that it's immaculate. And what we use at Shogun, when we're testing to see how our software is performing, and how our software pages are performing across various browser sizes, across browsers, across various screen sizes. If you want to go heavy duty with it, we use something called Browser Stack, which you can use. That's kind of probably on the higher end. If you're bootstrapping, if you're doing this yourself, I just recommend, obviously using, going through the flow on your phone, your partner's phone, your kid's phone, your tablet. Get as many devices as you possibly can, and test your site, and do it from landing page all the way through checkout to make sure that the experience is seamless.
This has been a repeat topic on the podcast, is like test your site, get other people to test your site. The insights you get out of it are insane.
Yep, totally. And for larger companies, there's lots of ways to do that, right? Like, again, with Shogun, we watch people use our software, right? We do screen recordings. We use a software called Full Story for that. There's another one, I think Crazy Egg does it. Hotjar does it as well.
Big fan of Hotjar.
Yeah, watching those sessions, even if this is probably for a little bit for the bigger companies, but using services like usertesting.com, right? Or lookback.io, and getting people to test over and over again and provide you that feedback, and you can watch their recorded sessions of them using your e-commerce site, and also like commenting on it as they're using it to explain things that they find confusing or that aren't working for them, or their frustrations, is like really, really valuable insight. And some of this stuff, you can do with a smaller budget. You don't need to be a massive enterprise company. And again, if you're DIYing, grab your friends, grab your family members, pool your devices together, and hold a session that way.
Absolutely. So obviously everyone's dream is to become that big company, to hit that gold mine as you would. But a lot of our listeners are just starting out, and they're getting their first sales, and they're on that transition from it being a side hustle to being to something that they can sustain themselves with. What would you say, like any tips or methods, for conversion rate optimization for those smaller, younger stores? What should they keep in mind when they're building out, their websites?
Yeah, the basics. I'll just go over the basics. Like, so number one, make it quick. Whether it's desktop or mobile, like your site needs to load really, really fast. Because if it doesn't, like the bounce rate is absolutely insane. A 2 second delay in web page load time can increase bounce rates by like as much as like 100%. So you really, really want your site to be running fast. And to test that, you can use tools like Think with Google, or Pingdom. You can use those to actually assess your site speed.
Are those
And
free, Nick? Sorry, just want to. Are both of
that's
those
a good
free?
question. Let me check that out real quick. I'm pretty sure Think with Google is free.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Pingdom might have paid. It might have a free version and paid versions.
I
Okay.
think they're both free, and I think I wrote a blog on it quite a
Okay.
while back.
And
one
we'll
of
put it in our show notes for sure. But
yeah,
I didn't know if at the top of your head
the
you knew if
one
those were
thing I
free.
do want to point out about that, about load speeds and stuff, a lot of our listeners are probably on Shopify or thinking about Shopify.
Yeah,
Shopify does help tremendously there with their built-in CDN,
yeah,
and their compression and stuff like that. But a lot of people think that Shopify is taking care of that. I don't need to worry about anything, which is absolutely false. They'll upload giant images that
yep.
aren't web ready, and that right there is what's killing their conversion rate. Like your huge banner image that's 3 megabytes is costing you money.
Yeah. So yeah, a couple things there. You're absolutely right. Like being having the pages being served up by Shopify CDN, and by the way, shameless plug for Shogun. You build the pages on Shogun, and then they are actually hosted and served up by Shopify and served up via Shopify CDN. Sometimes people wonder whether like where it's our CDN that's serving.
Will
Um,
Shogun optimize? Is that part of your platform?
so we automatically will serve the images at at a compressed version. The only way to actually make the images much larger is to go and go for like the higher plans and then manually override that. But yeah, we don't do automatic optimization for page size, but what we do is we provide helpful like warnings when you're hitting Shopify's, like we don't allow you to exceed Shopify's page size limit, right? So if you're trying to build a massive, massive page that you wouldn't be able to serve up, that Shopify wouldn't serve in their builder, you can't serve that from Shogun. Like we'll tell you the page is too big.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And tools that I know that are like good for like image compression, you can use like compressor.io. I think is a pretty good tool for that. But yeah, just knowing, keeping in mind, make sure that you're not trying to use massive images.
Okay.
So yeah.
Next on your conversion rate optimization tips, I'm sure you have a slew of them.
Yeah, for sure. Keep it simple. There's a lot of times where people like make really, really cluttered uh, landing pages, blog, whatever, where they're just like, they get so excited about their website. They're like, I want to stuff a bunch of information and a bunch of pictures and a bunch of products on this page. And I just want to get, have all the good stuff on this page. And actually, that can be really, really distracting for visitors. So you want to try to stick with, functional, minimal design for the most part, right? And part of that is making sure that when you're building a page, that you're trying to focus on like one, maybe two, what we call CTAs, calls to action. If you've got like four or five calls to action on a page, like where is the user supposed to focus?
Yeah. And now
You want
that call to action, you're saying it should be like the calls to action should be one specific message, correct?
Yes. So I would be you're like either you're trying to drive people into a product purchase flow, or you're trying to collect their email address, or you're trying to get them to browse collections, or you're trying to get them to view a set of products. But you're not trying to get them to do all of those things at the same time.
Support for our podcast comes from our friends at Simpler, a new way to staff 24/7 sales and customer service on your e-commerce store. It works with your existing email and chat platforms, so setup is quick and easy.
Simpler's network of on-demand, US-based Simpler specialists are standing by to answer your customers' most common questions. Set it up for free today and then turn it on or off depending on your customer volume. You only pay $2.25 for every resolution. No hidden fees, contracts, or minimums.
Close more sales with Simpler by staffing your email and live chat around the clock with Simpler specialists.
Start your free 7-day trial at simpler.ai/honest. That's simpler.ai/honest. The way I describe how to build like a really good landing page to people that aren't really familiar with like the logic behind it is like, imagine you have a bucket of water and there's one hole in it. The water's going to go out that hole. But if you have a bucket of water and there's 10 holes, the water's going to go in 10 different directions. Now replace the water with your website traffic and the holes as your call to actions.
Brilliant. Yep, exactly. That is a fantastic analogy. So you really want to direct that traffic. You really want to direct it with that CTA. And so, speaking of which, another thing is when you're building landing pages, consider removing your header. Usually, I just leave the footer because it's nice to have the site navigation down there in case people really, want to try to navigate. But sometimes when you're building landing pages, whether for mobile or for desktop, with the intent of doing a sale, the header with the nav can provide just more of a distraction.
Mm-hmm.
People are split thought about this. personally, especially for mobile, I think that like very robust headers that have a whole bunch of menu options, that's kind of a messier experience on mobile. And I think that people should lean heavier on search in their designs for, especially for mobile.
Yeah, smart
Because,
search is like the smartest thing you can do for your store in 2018, 2019 doesn't matter. If you don't have like auto correct and like autofill and suggested search built in with your store, that's leaving money on the table, especially now that, you know, probably anyone listening to this, their traffic is 75% mobile first.
yep, absolutely. So yeah, those would be some of my main tips. I mean, the other stuff that just are like the real, the real basics are, make sure that you offer free shipping. It's 2018, it's almost 2019. Everyone expects free shipping. If it can be something that I actually debate it. If you want to use it as like, hey, spend this amount and to reach unlock free shipping, do that. But generally, you should be following a strategy that like bundles the cost of shipping into your, into the price that you're showing the user, so that they don't, kind of bulk at like, oh gosh, I'm buying the item, but then I'm going to have this shipping charge. Another one is make sure that your contact information is on the site, or there's a way for the visitor to get in touch with you. Especially for a lot of, you mentioned a lot of your audience are like aspiring and like DIY, right? They're up and coming stores, right?
Hmm.
So if you're a really, big store, like some of Shogun's biggest client, like Lisa Mattresses or Movement Watches or Gaiam, or like Chubby Shorts, people just know those brands. So when they're shopping on those sites, they don't really worry about like, oh, if it doesn't work out with like, my shipment, or if I don't like my product, am I going to be able to actually get in touch with somebody who's going to, help me process a refund, or, help me do an exchange? You want to make sure that you're, as a smaller shop, are making yourself like accessible. So make it really clear that they can get into contact with you, whether that's through a page, whether that's through a live chat widget, whether that's through like, forms. I'll leave that to you. But yeah, make sure that they have a way to contact you.
Absolutely. I can't agree with that anymore.
Yep.
So let's pivot it. Let's flip the script. Let's talk about Shogun. It's real cool. I've used it on a few sites. So let's plug your company.
Yeah,
All
sure.
right. So I'm a Shopify store owner. Why should I use your app?
Yeah, absolutely. So Shogun is a really powerful page builder and content management system for all of your, pages that you've got on Shopify. So landing pages, homepage, blog pages, collection pages, product pages. And it's a very robust builder. It means that without writing code, you can build web pages. We've got a library of elements that include, images, video elements, Instagram, social share, accordions, tabs, sliders. You get the idea. Whole bunch of them, as well as all of your product components that are updated dynamically from Shopify when you're building these pages. And I think that it's really useful for everyone to have a system that does not require going in and digging into the liquid, or the HTML or CSS, to make edits to their site. And your options on Shopify otherwise are to use themes, which themes are awesome. And some of your theme pages, you might say this is perfect. But if you use just the theme pages for everything, your site might end up looking like a lot of other people's websites. So maybe you want to have the ability to make something custom to differentiate your website, and that's where Shogun's really useful.
So,
Um, yeah,
does Shogun replace a custom theme, or would you use both?
you would use both.
Okay.
So Shogun is going to pull in the theme's header and footer.
Okay.
And it's also, you can use your existing product page layout and then edit portions of it. It'll pull in your existing collections page layout, and then you can edit portions of it, or you can just do blank canvas for landing pages and blog pages and product pages, and make whatever kind of layout you'd like.
Okay.
And so yeah, so we've been this really powerful page builder. It's like I think between, I don't know the exact numbers because Shopify doesn't make them public, but we definitely know that over 10% and, perhaps closer to 20% of all of Shopify Plus uses Shogun. And then over 1% of all of Shopify, and Shopify has what, like, 600, 700,000 users use Shogun, to power their websites. And what we're going to be doing in 2019 is rolling out our analytics suite and our A/B testing suite. So you'll be able to test different versions of a page to see which one converts better for you. And so this type of optimization is what is routine for a lot of these, e-commerce companies that are trying to fine tune their pages for conversion. So we're very excited to unroll that stuff at the start of next year.
Yeah, I remember Blair shared that with me. You guys were talking about that months ago, the A/B testing.
Yeah, it's been in the works for a very long time. So right now we're finally finishing it up, as is often the case with software companies, right?
Yeah.
And also when you release something like A/B testing, you want to make sure that it works, right?
Yeah.
and so we
Test the testing. For sure.
exactly. So we've actually Shogun has been, ever since our inception, we've been collecting data. When you sign up for Shogun, you authorize Shogun to permit certain data. And we actually built our analytics suite months ago, and it's been running on websites, and we've been doing QA on it to make sure that our analytics are accurate, right, and that everything's running real smoothly. And so it's actually been running. People just haven't seen the user interface for it because we haven't released it. If that makes sense. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Yeah.
When are you, not to lock you into a date, but do you have a time when you think you're going to be launching that stuff? And it might be around when this podcast comes out.
Yeah, totally. My business partner, Finbar, who's our CEO, technical CEO, and formerly an engineer, he's telling me January. So I would say February.
So I would say when this podcast comes out, the A/B testing will probably be live.
Should be live by then.
Are you rolling it out across the platform or just to a chosen few in the beginning?
So we'll roll it out. It's initially going to be at the on the top tier of Shogun. But things like analytics will be available on the on the lower tiers.
Absolutely. So I just want to kind of jump back into like what Shogun is, and for any of our listeners to kind of really clarify it and why Electric Eye used it for some stuff. Shogun is a really powerful drag and drop page builder. Essentially, we were using it to create custom pages for our clients that allowed them to edit it really quickly and easily. Whereas in other ways, when we design landing pages or other custom stuff, I mean, it's 10 times more work, so a little bit more expensive to get in there and make it customizable through the standard Shopify theme settings. When you can just use Shogun and build it out in Shogun, and then if you can update your Facebook profile picture, you can update the content on these pages.
Exactly. And yeah, we partner with agencies. We partner with top agencies like Electric Eye, BVXL. We make websites.
All the Columbus boys.
Yeah, I think it's people always think, oh gosh, isn't our website builder and agencies isn't that kind of counter? And it's actually couldn't be further from the truth.
Oh yeah,
Like,
it's kind of akin to like, just because you have Photoshop doesn't make you a designer.
Exactly.
You still have to go through it with some strategy and insight on how do you want to accomplish the goal that you're trying to accomplish on this webpage.
Exactly. And for the big companies, they generally keep their agency on to continue work in Shogun and maintenance of that system and going as they go through design updates, etc.
Yeah, I like to work smarter and not harder, and I don't want to update copy for you. I want to show you how to do it.
Exactly. But the cool thing for those who are DIY, who are on like a super tight budget, Shogun gives you that ability to do it yourself. Obviously, like it's not magic. You're gonna have to put in the hours on first of all, if you've never built a website in a page builder, you might take a couple of days to learn how to use the tool, get comfortable with it. But from there, going and trying to learn some design principles and building out these pages. Obviously, we give some pre-made page templates to start, but that's the cool thing about it is for those folks who are very, very budget conscious and DIY. This is there's also an option there.
The tinkerers.
So I am budget
Yeah.
conscious store owner. What is the fee structure for Shogun?
Yeah, so it is a monthly fee structure. We have plans starting out as low as $19 per month. They go up. Obviously, we have custom enterprise deals with some of our very largest clients. But all of our self-serve plans, most of our self-serve plans are under $100. And again, they start off at $19, and I think the next one is up at $39. And we might actually be combining those two into a lower price point. So the cool thing about that is everything. If you're a DIY person, everything that you need for building out all of your web pages, landing pages, blog pages, product pages, is going to be on those lower tier plans. As you get up to the higher tier, that's where the fancier stuff starts to come in. Some of the developer tools, A/B testing will be on there to begin with. But if you're doing DIY, you can start right there. Now, some people, they're like, oh, I really don't want to pay every month, though. I don't want to be locked into this thing that I have to pay. Don't worry about it. You actually only have to pay for Shogun when you're using it. You can come in. Hey, if you can build your whole website in our 10-day free trial, you don't need to pay anything for it.
Oh,
right?
boom. Yeah.
Because
Okay.
when you uninstall Shogun, you keep your pages. Again, they are hosted by and served up by Shopify, not by us.
That's awesome. No, that's awesome.
Yeah. Now there is. I will say, most people they that kind of they're like perfect, and then they start using it, and then they realize I kind of have some changes I want to make to my website. Every month, so it ends up working out okay for us.
But at least you offer that.
Yeah,
out of the
totally.
gate.
Yeah, our goal is always to be user friendly. So yeah.
So as the co-founder, do you have any special discounts or deals that our listeners should know about for Shogun?
Yeah. We absolutely do. We have a special one for folks that are fans of Electric Eye and this podcast for 20% off any Shogun plan for life. So this will just knock off 20% off of that price. And you can, I think I provided a link, but it's a special link. And so click that link. And then when you go and it'll still say the same price like in the Shopify App Store. Don't let that scare you. When you click and install the app, then the plans page is going to come up in that install flow, and you'll see your discount pricing reflected there.
Yep, and I'll have that link in the show notes for anyone that's interested in trying it out with that discount. And
Cool.
I just remembered that we built like version 2.0 of Electric Eye's store, because I don't know if anyone knows this, but Electric Eye's website is built on Shopify, and we built version 2.0 with Shogun.
That's right. Totally right.
That's how we learned it. We're like, we'll just build our website with it.
Well, we are honored to have you as a client as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. Well, is there anything else that you want to make sure that you let our listeners know?
No, that's all. Happy holidays. Take this moment if you're somebody who's my first entrepreneurial pursuit. I started my agency. I was working like 2 jobs for 2.5 years. Getting it off the ground, getting it to a point where it could support first my employees and other business partners and myself. And so if you're somebody who's working 2 jobs, but you end up you got a little time over the holidays, enjoy your time with family, but stay on that grind and use some of that those days off to focus on your business and just come into 2019 super strong.
Absolutely. Luckily. Well, not luckily, I guess. So this is going to come out after that. So you just give them inspiration for the next holiday season.
There you go. Oh, yeah, that's right. My bad.
No worries. Nick, I can't thank you enough. You had a lot of awesome insights. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. Really, really great to be a guest. Thanks.
We can't thank our guests enough for coming on the show and sharing the truth. Links and more will be available in the show notes. If you found any actionable advice in this podcast that you'd like to apply to your business, please reach out at electriceye.io/connect.
Please make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast app of choice.